Welcome.
Thank you.
So this is your first BayBrazil conference.
Yes, this is my first BayBrazil conference. We did an event with BayBrazil last year, our own event in October, but that's the first time at this event, and I have to say that I'm impressed by the quality of the speakers, the content, and also the attendees. So congratulations to Magadiso, who built and created this conference and also this organization BayBrazil. I'm really very happy that it exists, and I'm honored by having the possibility to be here and to speak here.
Thank you for supporting us, Ralf. We really appreciate PagBrasil being the team now.
Yep, also as a sponsor, so thank you very much. So this is an interesting panel. You have two confused Brazilians. I'm Indian, raised in Brazil, living here, and I'll ask Ralf to introduce himself. So that's a typical Brazilian, where we're kind of always a mix of everything. So Ralf, why don't you give us a bit of your background?
Yeah, I think I heard before here that now we also have companies in Brazil that are founded and managed by foreigners that moved to Brazil. So I'm one of these guys. I was born in Switzerland. I'm originally from Germany, and I went to school in Brazil. So and when Brazilians ask me where I come from, I always say, okay, I'm German, but my heart is Brazilian. And our company, PagBrasil, is a payment service provider. We're a payment platform, and this whole thing started in 2009. I had another company which still exists, which sold software into all Portuguese and Spanish-speaking countries. And I found that selling to Brazil over the internet was difficult because you needed local payment method, local cards, domestic cards. You need payment methods like boleto bancário and other payment methods. And then I wanted to find a provider for these payment methods, and that didn't exist. And then I thought, oh, if it doesn't exist, I have to create it. And this is how the whole project started.
So that's a great example of being an entrepreneur, right? Find a problem and go solve it. So give us a bit more background about PagBrasil. Tell us a bit more what exactly it does, and also about your kind of organizational structure within Brazil and your partner and so on.
Okay. PagBrasil is a company headquartered in Porto Alegre in the south of Brazil. All the Brazilians here know where that is. It's the biggest city in the south of Brazil, and it's a good place to have a company. It's not typical because most of the e-commerce companies, they are based in São Paulo, but Porto Alegre is also a good city with talent, good universities, and companies like Dell or HP are having large offices there. Our company has also offices in Barcelona and in Singapore, and we provide payment services to merchants from all over the world. Brazilian merchants, but also merchants that sell cross-border into Brazil. And typically we also have international, multinational merchants where we negotiate the agreement with a company and with the headquarters in Asia, for example, with technical integration somewhere in Europe, and then the daily business is managed in Brazil. And what we try to do is we focus 100% on Brazil. We don't do anything. In the previous panels, people talked about expansion and Brazilian companies expanding to other markets. We took the decision that we will focus only on the Brazilian market because we believe that, at least in our business, Brazil is by far the biggest opportunity in Latin America, and we came to the conclusion that going deeper and broader inside the Brazilian market in terms of service and technology that we develop in Brazil, we can create much more value. Value for the merchants that use our services, value also for the consumers that pay through our payment methods, and at the end also in terms of company value, and with that also value for the employees.
So with that kind of background, there's been a lot of talk about fintech. Fintech is big here, fintech obviously is big in Brazil. We had some panelists earlier, a lot of mentions of Nubank. Talk a bit about your perspective on the fintech market opportunity in Brazil. When we were discussing, you had some really interesting insights on fintech in Brazil, specifically and with consumers. So just give folks a bit of a perspective on the fintech market.
Yeah, I think Brazil historically is a market that was dominated by a few banks and acquirers, and so these companies were, from a consumer perspective, from the consumer point of view, inefficient. And in most markets in the world, consumers don't like banks, for example. And the other example is in the credit card acquiring segment. There were only 2 players until 2007, I believe, and it was totally concentrated. And now the Brazilian central bank decided to open that market and to foster competition, but also innovation. And in the acquiring market, for example, we have now the opposite situation. We have 20 acquirers in the market, by far too many. And there's a very tough competition, mainly on price, and this will drive further change. But here was a lot of, we had a lot of panels on innovation and on the creativity of the Brazilian population. I think this is also a main driver. People, Brazilians are early adopters. They are happy to try out new things, and that is, I think, the main thing. And one thing I wanted to say as well, people were talking here very often now that Brazil is the biggest market in terms of fintech, in terms of venture capital flowing into the market. But I remember that I did presentations maybe 8 years ago where we were analyzing what are the top 10 e-commerce companies in Latin America. And already by that time, from the top 10 e-commerce companies in Latin America, 7 were Brazilian companies. So the innovation, it's not that it came only in the last few years, it's a long-term thing. Brazil is really the driver in Latin America when it comes to fintech and e-commerce.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with that. Having Margariza has organized this event for 8 years, I think the quality, the breadth, the level of attendees, companies, etc., is pretty phenomenal. So I think we can see it from here as well. So when we were discussing, you had some, I think, very insightful data around some of the specific things about the Brazilian market. The number of cell phones and the percentage of households that have smartphones versus some of the issues with financial inclusion. Let's talk a bit about that and kind of give folks a bit of a sense for the challenges and what are the type of opportunity that creates in the market.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very interesting topic, very good question. If you look at the Brazilian market 5, 6, 7 years ago, e-commerce or the digital world was only for the income groups called A and B in Brazil, so the middle to higher income groups that could afford a computer, a laptop, or an internet subscription at home. All the rest of the population, 150 million people or more, they were excluded from that. They didn't participate at all. So things like payment by credit cards was fine. Everybody could live with that. And now that's completely changed with smartphones. Today, 92% of all Brazilian households have at least one smartphone. Sometimes they change. And 85% of all Brazilians have a smartphone. So the majority of the population has a smartphone and participates in e-commerce through that smartphone. And what I always say is that you look, these people in remote areas in Brazil, sometimes they can't buy certain products because they're not available. It's not like Europe or the United States where you can have shops selling everything everywhere. No, they rely on the e-commerce and the smartphone to buy certain things. They buy phone covers, even people with a very low income, they buy phone covers directly from China. People buy tickets for events. And they also buy, for example, a good example is also that everybody wants to flirt and use Tinder. Almost everybody.
Most people.
most people. So it's not limited to people that have a bank account or people that live in a certain region or people with a certain level of education. It doesn't matter. Everybody wants to participate in these kind of things. And this is a huge opportunity in the Brazilian market, and we have heard a lot about inclusion here in the market. But there's a very big problem which remains, that there are no payment method for these people. Most company, it can be Silicon Valley company, but even Brazilian domestic local companies, they offer mainly credit cards, debit cards, boleto bancário, which is a voucher kind of payment, but these payment methods don't really work for all of the Brazilians. So they continue, somehow excluded.
So with that gap, how is something like what you're doing helping them start to close that gap with technology and obviously with new processes around that?
First, let me give you an example of. Recently, I visited one of the Brazilian airlines, and one of these 3 airlines that still exist, not the one that goes bankrupt. And they told me a story that the president of that airline had a guy that worked in the building where he lives asked him, I know that you the president of that airline, and I need to buy an airline ticket to visit my family, but I don't have payment methods to buy the tickets. Could you please buy the ticket for me, bring it to me, and then I give you the money? And another example they gave me is that they have people that live in a town in the countryside, and they travel 1 hour to the next airport to buy the airline the ticket in cash, because they don't have payment methods. So it is a real problem. These people want these things, but they can't. And then there's one payment method. I will ask here the Brazilians. So how do you think anybody in Brazil could pay something online in cash? How would you do that? Who wants to answer that question? Boleto, yes, very good. Very good thing. Anybody in Brazil can pay an online transaction with Boleto if Boleto is offered, what most of the companies do. But what is the problem? No, it's not fraud.
3 days or 4 days.
Yeah, that's one of the problems, that the payment confirmation takes like 1, 2, 3, 4 days. But there's even a more important problem. I heard you print it. You have to print it, exactly. That's the problem. You have to print the boleto. And hey, it's fun. Everybody thinks, yeah, it's fantastic. You have a product, everybody can pay it in cash. But to pay it, you have to print it first and then go to a bank branch or go to a lottery agency or other acceptance place where you can pay it. But you think that, who has a printer at home here? Yeah, a few people. And who has a printer at home but run out of ink? Yeah, look.
Very good.
So that's typical. The people don't have printers, and people who do everything, their e-commerce, everything on the mobile phone, they don't have a printer. They definitely don't have a printer at home. And there are also stories. We did a lot of research on that, and there are stories that teenagers, they want to buy something, an item for their games online, and then they go to their school and ask their teacher, could I please print the boleto here at the school, use the school printer, so that I can pay for what I want to buy. So that's ridiculous, and it's a big obstacle nobody thinks about. So we found it out through research, and then we decided to think about a solution that allows people to generate a digital transaction and pay that in cash. And we created a product which we called PagFlash, which allows people to, it's very, very simple. You just generate a transaction, select, I want to pay in cash at Lotéricas, and then a code is generated. The person goes with that code to a Lotérica, it's a lottery agency, and informs that code. The agent looks up that transaction in the system, and the person pays, gets the receipt, and the payment is done and confirmed in a few minutes. And with that product, now finally, everybody in Brazil is included and can pay online transactions. That's one solution, but obviously there are other companies working on other solutions, wallet solutions and stuff like that, that might also enable people to pay. Another solution which exists in Brazil is like, for example, Google Play or Uber. They sell prepaid cards in physical stores so that people can recharge their or top up their Uber or Google Play account and use the services these companies provide.
So speaking of Uber, one of the things we were talking about was, so Uber is one of the biggest markets for Brazil. Brazil is one of the biggest markets for Uber. And what did Uber have to do to address some of the financial inclusion gaps in Brazil that they didn't do elsewhere?
Yeah, what Uber did is first they started only with credit cards, Uber is huge in Brazil, and I think São Paulo is, people said that before, I think it's even the biggest city of Uber in the world. São Paulo. And first they started only with cards, and again we have that situation I described before. Only people that have cards can participate, could use Uber. And then Uber decided to open that and give the people the possibility to pay the driver in cash. And when they did that, the Uber business exploded. It really exploded in terms of volume. Because even for people that usually use the bus, sometimes it's cheaper or more or less the same price to go on an Uber than taking the bus. And you don't have to walk, and the Uber driver stops right in front of your house. But the problem is in Brazil that the Uber drivers they don't want cash, because the problem is that if they have cash, then they are a target for robbery. So they don't want to have cash; they want to get the money directly to their account. So then Uber started with other solutions like the prepaid cards and other top-up possibilities.
So, PagBrasil has been around for a little while. There was one of the panels this morning, there was a lot of talk about the amount of lawyers and other functions that you have to spend money to get business going. What are some of the challenges you see? You're only operating in Brazil, you have a very Brazil-centric market opportunity. What are the challenges, and how have you found ways to navigate doing business in Brazil?
Yeah, it was, I'm not Brazilian. I went to school in Brazil, but I'm not Brazilian. And when we started to work on the Brazilian market and try to find out how that works, how it could work, because in the beginning we started right away also to do cross-border transactions. So we collected money in Brazilian real in Brazil, and then did money conversion to dollars and euros, and transferred these monies to the merchants all over the world. And to find out the correct legal way to do that was really, really difficult, because we went to a central bank and asked how to do that, and they gave an answer. Then next day we met somebody else at the central bank that told us something else, and then we went to lawyers and they told us something else. So it took a long time at that time, because it was, we were pioneer at that time doing that. And it was really difficult and took us a long time. And still today, many people here represent companies, tech companies, and we create disruptive or innovative solutions. And the legislation in Brazil on that is often it's not clear, and it's contradictive. So it's difficult to find a way sometimes to really do it 100% correct and to be sure that there is no risk. So what we do is we work with associations that then work with the government and with the regulator, which is the Central Bank of Brazil, to get these things defined so that we have legal certainty or regulative certainty on these things, what we do. And this goes well. I think Brazil has done big steps ahead during the past years in these areas.
So yeah, you mentioned the central bank. So we were talking a bit about China. So in China, you can WePay and Alipay. That's a big part of the payment system. It's basically run by two private companies, right? And you can question how private they are in China, but nonetheless, they are private companies. So in Brazil, my understanding is the central bank is actually proposing some new initiatives to help put a bit more of a framework around that. Talk a bit about that, and maybe some of the entrepreneurs here might get some ideas on how they can benefit from that.
Yeah, that's right. And the Brazilians, in Brazil today, I mentioned that before, we don't have a good payment solution for the 45 to 55 million unbanked adults in Brazil. On top of that, we also have teenagers that also would like to pay digital transactions. There are very limited solutions for that. While in other countries, like in China, there is a solution. You have Alipay and WeChat Pay, and if you're in China, you see everybody is paying everywhere with these kind of payment methods. And if you go there as a foreigner, you can't have this payment method, and it's really difficult to get along because you have to pay in cash. It's the only option, and sometimes that's also difficult. And so why this doesn't exist in Brazil? There are many companies that tried to launch solution. There are many initiatives, but nothing really got what was accepted in the market and broadly. So, but still the need is there, and financial inclusion is also for the Brazilian Central Bank a very, very important objective. and they decided not to, they don't want a situation like we have in China, that two private companies dominate all the money flow, at least at a certain level of amount of money. They want a system which is open to everybody in the market. So the central bank is working now, there's an initiative which is called Pagamentos Instantáneos, instant payments, which will be a peer-to-peer payment system which allows sending money from one person to another person, from a business to a person, from a business to another business. It will allow payments. And the objective is to have a very low-cost system which even allows transactions, micro-transactions, or transactions with a very low value, which allows people that sell whatever, who has ever been to Brazil knows that if you go to a beach in Brazil, you can buy everything almost, at least you can, food and drinks and whatever you imagine and have dreamt of, you can get by at the beach. And these people, today you have to pay in cash. And sometimes they accept credit cards, but usually you have to pay in cash. And for that, such a system, the system is also intended so that these small entrepreneurs have the possibility to charge electronically. And I think it's an excellent initiative because it is open, it is better for the country that there's a system that is open for everybody, and which will be low cost, and which will be the basis for innovation, because around that a lot of new products and services can be created. So I think it's really a great initiative, and the Brazilian Central Bank as a regulator is very open to suggestions, to listening to all the market players, and theoretically anybody who wants can participate in these projects and these hearings to the central bank and give comments and suggestions, and these comments and suggestions are also taken into consideration.
Great. I do have a couple more questions, but maybe we could just open it up for the, sorry? Yeah, so let's open it for the audience. Any questions to, yes, right up here in the front. Can we get a mic, please? There it is.
Say your name and company.
Okay. Hi, my name is Henrique from CryptoLens.io, a startup on crypto. So that's going to be my question. How do you see the cryptocurrencies and especially Libra disrupting this all these markets?
This is my personal opinion, I believe that crypto has the potential to disrupt. I also believe that all these things which people imagine that crypto could represent one day, like a world currency, a payment system, cross-border transactions, very fast and low cost, I believe that all this will happen. I don't know if Libra will be the platform, because it will happen, but Libra is one initiative, and maybe Libra won't really fly because it's initiated in the United States. It has to comply with regulation in the United States. It will have competition from initiatives from other countries and regions like China. The central bank in China also launched something. There will also be private initiatives which are completely independent from countries, or distributed solutions which are not even in a certain jurisdiction. So nobody can really tell them what to do and what not to do. And then there will also be competition between the countries, because if this flies, then like the currency like the euro or the United States dollar will get competition, serious competition, and there are countries that obviously have an interest to take away a bit of this dominance of these currencies. So I believe that it will be disruptive, and it will happen. Now, I also want to speak a bit from my perspective as Brazilian representative of Brazilian payment companies. We have to be very careful of touching crypto, because if banks hear crypto, they stop everything. And this is not only in in Brazil. And when we opened the bank account for our entity in Singapore, the first question we were asked by the banks, do you do crypto? Because if we did, they wouldn't even talk to us. And this is a bit similar. I don't know if anybody here has this experience from Brazil. So we were very careful and we stayed out of all these kind of things because we would endanger our current business.
You don't do it anymore. Was there a question back there? No? Up here? Up here.
Hi, I'm Pedro, co-founder of Flourish, and we're redesigning the way individuals engage with their finances. We operate here today, and we see things like Plaid, Synapse, platforms that have done open banking, and they're not platforms that are owned by the bank. In Brazil, the central bank has said, we're going to move towards open banking, and we have seen the big players, the oligopoly, scrambling to be that platform. From your point of view, do you think it will be created a similar ecosystem as you have here, that a third party will be creating the aggregation, like a Guiabolso type of player that can provide that to fintech, or will that be by the banks?
To be honest, I don't know the situation very well in the United States. I know the situation in Europe and in some European countries. I believe that let's speak generally about fintech versus the Brazilian banks. What we see and what we feel as a fintech company in the Brazilian market, when we started, the banks would think that we are something unnecessary. They didn't want to see, they didn't want to talk to, and they didn't even see that it would make sense, that our existence didn't make sense to them. And this has completely changed. Now there's interest, there are approaches, people from the highest level of the biggest banks in Brazil want to talk to us because they see that we add value to the market, and they see that they need to collaborate with fintech companies that create innovative services and products in the market so that they can survive in the long term. So I think that I believe that the large Brazilian banks, they have very, very deep pockets, and they will survive and they will fight for their survival. And I believe that they will also collaborate with the fintech companies.
Right. One final question. No. So I'll just ask the final one and then we can wrap up. So very quickly, any recommendations for the entrepreneurs in Brazil? Anything you would say, hey, lessons you've learned, scars you have that they should avoid?
It is not easy to do business in Brazil, and this is what I always tell people. It's a huge opportunity, but it's not easy. It's not easy from a regulatory and legal point of view. I spoke about that before. Brazil is also a huge country. For example, who knows what is the distance on roads from New York to San Francisco? Any idea? It's 2,900 miles. If you go from Recife to the west border in Brazil, it's 3,300 miles. And I can tell you the quality of the roads is not the same.
It's not very good here either, but that's...
So geographic extension in Brazil is a challenge for some companies, depending on the business. Also, in one of the sessions before, people spoke about mobile coverage. Now, you have regions, there is no mobile phone coverage, or you have just edge. And I often experience that when I travel to Brazil, you leave the cities and suddenly there is no, you don't have internet anymore, it's gone. It's like being on an intercontinental flight. Then you have also, one of the big problems in Brazil is all the fiscal compliance or the fiscal duties a company has, the ease of doing business. Brazil on a global scale is, according to a study by the World Bank, now on place 109, if you remember right, and China's, just to give you a reference, is about at 44, and the other BRICS countries are all in that range. So Brazil is very, very complex. in this, and this is an important challenge. Somebody said it before, you need a good tax advisor or accounting company to solve all these kind of issues in Brazil. So there are many obstacles, and it's difficult to get in the country. So if you entrepreneurs say, let's do Brazil today, and then you see all the problems, and then many people walk away because they see it's too complex. But if you really do all these steps and go through all these problems, then you will encounter a huge opportunity and often also less competition. And that's important. So it's more difficult to get in because of that, there's less competition, because not everybody really has the patience and the persistence to go through all these problems. But if you do, then you can have a great and very profitable business in Brazil.
Awesome. Ralf, thank you very much for being here and for the sponsorship. Pleasure.